Remember the 5th of November, the gunpowder treason and plot? I know of no reason the gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. The plan was simple. King James I, the Queen, and Prince Henry Frederick would be present at the opening of Parliament on November 5th. One massive explosion would take out the King, the heir, most of the House of Lords and the House of Commons, decapitating the whole English government in one swoop. But what was the goal of conspirators, and how did the plot fail? Welcome to History is Criminal. I am your host, Mick Biddick. In this episode, we'll take a look at the attempted mass murder of the royal family in the Houses of Parliament in hopes of bringing about political and religious change across England. To many a handful of listeners in the UK, this might be common knowledge, and I really hope I don't screw up your history too much. For those outside the UK, maybe you know parts of the story, or maybe the name Guy Fawkes springs to mind. The whole story is one, as they say, for the history book. Starting even before Henry VIII was having a complicated time with religion, in truth, all of Europe was busy killing each other over questions of just what type of Christianity their government was going to force upon them. It could be that religion was tied to money, and that caused governments to care so much about how the people worshipped. Also, never forget that religion controlled many aspects of the people's lives, and the monarchs clearly didn't like the idea of anyone else having control except for themselves. Of course, with control comes the ability to take people's money. And so you see the tie there. When Henry broke with the Catholic Church in order to divorce Catherine of Aragon, not everybody in England was super thrilled about it. To consolidate power, Henry went after the church and the monasteries across England. Then Henry up and dies, leaving a young, sickly Edward VI in charge. Edward, it turns out, wasn't king for very long, adding to the confusion his sisters Mary and Elizabeth both had supporters pushing their claims to the throne, and as it turns out, one was Catholic and the other Protestant. Mary, the elder sister, took the throne in a fairly bloody reign that turned England Catholic once again. All the killing and burning of folks kind of ended up being pointless because she died and her Protestant younger sister, Elizabeth, came to the throne, firmly establishing the Church of England. Now, a few folks had issues with this, and a couple plots were hatched to get rid of Elizabeth and replace her with, among others, her cousin, Mary, Queen of Scotland. Now, Mary had her own problems in Scotland and would be forced out in favor of her own son, James V. Mary would ironically flee to England, hoping to gain the protection and support of her cousin Elizabeth. Instead, she was imprisoned and later executed. Elizabeth, who then up and died without any kids of her own, so James V of Scotland became James I of England in addition to being James V of Scotland. Now, if that doesn't confuse you, I don't know what will, but James I and James V are the same people, just James I of England and James V of Scotland. Now, we could hope that with James coming to the throne, it would bring an end to all this crazy religious fighting and who should be the heir. But as it turns out, James had his own weird history with religion. Born and baptized Catholic by his mother, he would be raised Protestant by relatives, the same folks who'd ran off his mother. Once becoming King of England, James was then also the head of the Anglican Church. Now, while he seemed to have some sympathy for the common Catholics, but he took issue with the Catholic clergy. Surprisingly, his mother's religion didn't seem to have much of a hold on him, maybe because he had no real memories of her, having not seen her since he was 10 months old. He cracked down on the Catholic Church, even jailing and executing some priests. So it was that some English Catholics wanted to see James and the whole Stuart line go the way of the dinosaur. In May 1603, Robert Catesby started to formulate a plan to remove the whole English government all at once. Catesby, a Catholic radical whose father had been unfortunate enough to face the wrath of Elizabeth I for refusing to acknowledge a Church of England, assembled his team: Thomas Winter, Thomas Percy, John Wright, and of course the most famous conspirator of all, his cousin Guy Fawkes. Fawkes' religious upbringing was, in a weird way, kind of a mirror universe of James. He was born in 1570 and baptized Protestant. Then, when little Guy was just 8 years old, his father died, and his mother remarried Dionysius Brainbridge, a Catholic. It seems Guy took a liking to his new stepdad and adopted his religion, converting to Catholicism. He was so Catholic, in fact, that he, at the age of 21, traveled to the continent to fight for Catholic Spain against the Protestant Dutch in what was known as the 8 Years' War. A staunch defender of the faith, he would be an easy recruit for his cousin. And as the only conspirator with any actual experience handling gunpowder, he would play a very important part in the plot. By 1604, the outline of the plan had formed. They would blow up the king and all of his ministers and all the House of Lords and Commons at the next opening of Parliament. Now, from a modern perspective, this plan seems so bad that it could never work. After all, it's not like you can fly over in 1605 and drop a bomb on the Parliament building. The Wright brothers wouldn't get into the air for another 300 years, and the Germans had actually bombed the Parliament building 14 times during World War II, but never managed to blow up Parliament. With modern security, getting a bomb into Parliament would seem impossible. Metal detectors, bomb sniffing dogs, facial recognition, armed guards, and that's just backstage at Taylor Swift. I can imagine how difficult it is to get backstage at Parliament. But then again, they didn't sell nearly as many EPs as Taylor. And as far as I know, I don't think even one NFL star is dating Parliament. Still, however, I bet it's pretty hard to get in past their security, too. In the 1600s and before, it seemed like they might have taken security a little light. This was, after all, not that long after a group of men actually broke into Mary Queen of Scots' bedroom and killed her closest advisor while the Queen was sitting there. So security was a little light, and even getting close to the seat of power was insanely easy. What makes it even more ridiculous is that there had already been plots against James. A foiled kidnapping ended in the bloody execution of two priests. The sending of a rosary to Queen Anne from the Pope was discovered by a spy working for James. This led to him expelling all Jesuits and other priests from the country in 1604, and a crackdown on Catholic landowners and nobles. It's safe to say that tensions were high and that precautions should have been taken. But as you'll see, it didn't really happen. As the number of conspirators increased, Fawkes even traveled outside of England to get support from foreign powers. But even as the plot grew, the conspirators were able to keep it secret and almost pulled the insane idea off. The plan came to fruition, and they rented a home near the palace, Westminster, and were going to tunnel into the basement of the palace and plant the explosives. In an act of pure hubris, they didn't even use a fake name when they rented the house, renting it in the name of Thomas Percy. They dug from December 1604 until March of 1605 and made it about halfway to the basement below the House of Lords when they discovered that that very space was open for rent. Percy then rented the space in the basement of the House of Lords, the Palace of Westminster, aka Parliament. I know it sounds insane, but in the 1600s, you could actually rent space under the seat of government in England. That doesn't sound like top notch security to me. And as we have seen so many times in this podcast, background checks were not very good in ye old days. Once they secured a room directly underneath the House of Lords, the next step was simple: start to smuggle large amounts of gunpowder into the building. Again, the lapse of security is mind blowing, pun intended. They had time. Parliament wasn't set to open until the 5th of November, giving them plenty of time to slowly move gunpowder into the building. As Fawkes was the only one with experience handling gunpowder, he was in charge of placing the barrels. In all, they were able to place 36 kegs of gunpowder, about 1.5 tons, directly under the House of Lords. Plot was working, but just blowing up the king and parliament wouldn't be enough to guarantee success. They would also need a body to place on the throne and military support to hold it. All of this would mean the conspiracy would have to expand. Now, it's a simple rule of thumb that the more people you involve in your conspiracy, the greater your chances for discovery. Members of the Catholic gentry became aware of the plot, and the plan became more focused. After the explosion, they would kidnap the young Princess Elizabeth, and the infant Charles would also be kidnapped and taken to a pre planned meeting place. Fawkes would quickly travel to Flanders and seek out military support for their coup d'etat. This pressure on a crippled government, they believed, would force it to give in to their demands. Elizabeth could be installed as queen with a Catholic regent, specifically Henry Piercy, the Earl of Northumberland. It seems they never really cleared this with Northumberland first, a fact that would save his life. He would spend decades in the Tower of London, but his imprisonment wasn't all that harsh. He had 20 servants to wait on him, custom accommodations, complete with his own covered bowling alley, and was routinely allowed guests. But it seems that someone got cold feet and wrote a letter. Lord Monteagle was one of many Catholic nobles who was going to be in Parliament for the opening. While he had taken part in some Catholic plots against the government in the past, he had sworn his support to the new king. He was also friends with many of those involved in this new plot to blow up the king. One conspirator wanted to warn his friend not to attend the opening of Parliament. So it was on the 26th of October, an unknown messenger dropped off an anonymous note. It read, "My lord, out of the love I bear to some of your friends, I have a care of your preservation. Therefore, I would advise you, as your tender life, to devise some excuse to shift your attendance at this Parliament. For God and man have conquered to punish the wicked of this time, and think not slightly of this advertisement, but retire yourself into your country, where you may expect the event in safety. Though there be no appearance of any stir, yet I say they shall receive a horrible blow this Parliament, and yet they shall not see who hurts them. The council is not to be condemned, because it may do you good and may do you no harm. For the danger is past, and as soon as you are burnt the letter, I hope God will give you the grace to make good use of it. To whose holy protection I commend you." Had Monteagle kept the warning to himself and spent the day in the country estate, history would be very different. Monteagle, however, told a group of other nobles, and they made their own plan to catch the conspirators red handed. Their counterplot was to search the space beneath Parliament, but wait until they believed they would catch one of the plotters with the explosives. Word of the warning to Monteagle reached Catesby on the 28th of October. Many of the conspirators begged him to call off the whole plot, but he checked with Fawkes and learned that the gunpowder had not been touched. This convinced him that either Monteagle had not been warned, or that Monteagle approved of the plot and was going to spend a day in the country. Fawkes then returned to guard the gunpowder. On the 4th of November, King James was made aware of the letter and ordered Thomas Howard to search the building. Howard was accompanied by Monteagle. Reaching a space rented by the conspirators, they banged on the door. Fawkes opened the door himself, allowing Howard and Monteagle to see a large pile of firewood in the corner. The fact that Fawkes had a lantern, matches, and a fuse probably sparked some suspicions. They demanded to know who the space belonged to, and Fawkes told them Thomas Piercy. So he didn't even try to disguise who rented the space. Hearing Piercy's name sent up a bunch of red flags, and Howard insisted they search the room. Thomas Kybet, the Westminster magistrate, and his men quickly found the poorly hidden gunpowder underneath the pile of firewood. Fawkes was arrested just after midnight on the 5th of November. Fawkes was taken before the king for questioning. When he was asked what his goal had been, he replied, "I wish to blow the Scottish king and all of his Scottish lords back to Scotland." Reportedly, James was impressed with Fawkes' candor, but that would do little to help him. Sir William Watt, lieutenant of the Tower, led the interrogation of Fawkes. James himself wrote out the warrant, and it read in part, "If he will not other ways confess, the gentler tortures are to be used upon him. Then, step by step, you may employ the harsher. And so speed your good work. The gentler tortures." Somehow, I don't think that meant tickling him with a feather. Guy Fawkes impressively held out till the 9th of November, then confessed and named his co-conspirators. There's no record of exactly what tortures were used, but it would no doubt have included the rack and the breaking of bones. A comparison of his signature on his confession to those he had made earlier point to the latter having been written with broken hands. Once they learned the news of Fawkes' capture, the others attempted to flee, but were soon tracked down. They had expected sympathizers to join them, but nobody came to their aid. Catesby, Piercy, and Wright were killed in a gun battle with sheriffs. The remaining conspirators were rounded up, except two who managed to escape to the continent. They would all be sentenced to hang. Guy Fawkes was the last to hang. A contemporary account was written by a witness. Last of all came the great devil of all, Guy Fawkes, alias Johnson, who should have put fire to the powder. This body, weak with torture and sickness, was scarce able to go up the ladder. Yet, with much ado, by the help of the hangman, went high enough to break his neck by the fall. He made no speech, but his crosses and idle ceremonies made his end upon the gallows in the block, to the greater joy of all the beholders, that the land was ended of so wicked villainy. The bodies of the conspirators were quartered and sent to various parts of the kingdom as a message to any others who might plot against the king. Harsher anti-Catholic laws were passed in Parliament, and the slow crawl England had been making towards religious tolerance was pushed back for generations. In 1606, James pronounced that the 5th of November be made a day of thanksgiving to celebrate the failure of the Gunpowder Plot. Today, Guy Fawkes Day, or Bonfire Night, it is sometimes called, is still celebrated with bonfires, fireworks, and often effigies of Guy Fawkes being burned. Traditionally, children would carry guys through the streets, asking people to give a penny for the guy as they took them to be burned. There's also the ceremonial search. The yeoman of the guard looks for explosives in the cellars of Palace Westminster before the opening of Parliament. It wouldn't be until the late 18th and early 19th century that Parliament started to ease the anti-Catholic laws. To think The anti-Catholic fervor started with Henry VIII, a man who once was awarded the title of Defender of the Faith by Pope Leo X because of his defense of the Catholic Church against the ideas of Martin Luther. So you can choose to see this as a strong reminder not to mix the church and state, or as a warning of the consequences of oppression. Either way, the 5th of November, Guy Fawkes, and the Gunpowder Plot will always hold a place in the English consciousness. As for the rest of us, it gives us a wild story to the degree a people will go if they feel they've been pushed hard enough. Thanks to History.com and Britannica.com, where I got the majority of the information for this story. This has been History is Criminal. Come back next week, and we'll take a look at some dastardly deeds done in the frozen north and the murder of a famed Arctic explorer. And as usual, if you like what you heard, tell a friend. And if you don't like it, tell an enemy. Never suffer alone.